Yo.
Welcome, everyone who's turned in today to the Investigator News Network. This is the Williams Show, the military report on this the 6th day of June, in the year of our Lord 2023. Let's discuss what has been happening in the Ukraine war. There's been, oh my goodness, my service dog, Miss Miki's having opinions here. She says there's special sniffs around. Okay, moving on. Back to the war. With respect to the war, the debt ceiling bill in Washington's been passed by both the Republicans and Democrats to aid in continuing the war. I believe that's one of the main reasons it occurred. And hello, Karen and Susan. The second thing that's going on is there's a new Ukrainian offensive that they talked about, the spring offensive, which I guess is now the summer offensive, just got underway a few days ago, or a couple days ago, and is, well, let's say not off to a great start. Ukraine and NATO's launch has been part of launching this long-awaited attack that's been touted on the state-run media that they've kind of been, so begging for. There's a lot of propaganda going on around the war in Ukraine, and also a lack of information. There's not a lot of clear information coming out. Ellie's typing away there.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Sorry about that, but
you're fine.
The
United Kingdom, over dire concerns of the war, let's just call it the war in Europe now, has started its own state-run Ministry of Truth to back up the war and push it, as well as pushing the Grand Green New Deal, which is, the two of them are incompatible. I think, watching this over time in Ukraine, the folks in D.C. and London appear to be delusional, meaning they don't have a firm grasp on reality, or don't care to have a grasp on reality, or are so wound up in their machinations they can't let it go. I don't know. Something's going on with them, and it's pretty sad to see our leaders this far out of touch. So another fallout from our fine Ukrainian war is we're having javelins and AT-4 shoulder launch missiles showing up in Mexico, right down on the Texas border there on the Gulf.
William,
yeah.
Just for a second, they have found missile launchers on the border now. This is something that's been in the news for the last few days, and I did put it on as a info on my last show, and they are now. It's basically reported in Mexico News, all of their networks, and they say now it has moved up to our border. We have missile launchers on the border now.
Right. They're just across the Rio Grande River there in South Texas.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's almost direct south of San Antonio, which is quite a ways away, but that's San Antonio is just north of it. And so the javelins came from the United States. This is according to Redacted. But here's the interesting thing. The AT-4s are not from the United States. They're from Sweden. And apparently there's more of the AT-4s than the javelins. Now, Russia's reporting has destroyed Ukraine's last warship in the Black Sea. I'm going to get this name terrible. The Yuri Olefarenko is the name of the ship at the port of Odessa. And Russia's now claiming that it's pushed Ukrainian units out of two settlements in the Donetsk region and at Krasnohorivka and Yazin Avata in the Donetsk region. Now, this is the one that bothers me the most. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has issued NATO a now or never ultimatum that they have to both NATO now or never ultimatum. They must support the continued war in Ukraine and must be issued an immediate invitation to quickly join NATO. Now, if that's the case, I believe what's happening here is Zelensky knows that that he no longer has the personnel numbers necessary to support a continued offensive in the four regions, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Crimea, and one other. And so in Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, an attack on one of the alliance is an attack on all the alliance. And so what's happening here, I believe, is Zelensky needs NATO to come in as a fighting force to support his military ambitions to get those provinces back into the Ukrainian sphere. And to make it even more damaging, he's said that they're getting better information on targeting Putin directly. So if you were to topple the Putin government, oh yeah, we have been banned. So if we were to topple the Putin government, what would happen? We would have a situation like we had at the end of the Cold War when the Soviet Union came apart. And here's why. because there would be no clear control of who's in control of nuclear weapons in Russia. So even though the Russian state would not collapse and the Russian people would be willing to fight, the control of Russian nuclear weapons would be then thrown up and completely in the air. At the same time that Russia is involved in a land war on its border, and at the same time where Zelensky's Ukrainian forces have struck into Russia proper. I mean, crossed the border from the old Ukrainian provinces right into the border region of Russia, and instigated attacks there. And at the same time, which this makes it worse, is our own government is becoming more and more reticent to criticize Zelensky for attacking over the Russian border. Now, initially, at the beginning of the war, it was, you will not use our missiles to fire over the border. Well, now that's changing. We've got Western mission creep, if you will. All right, so that's what I have to say about that little portion. Anyway, if Russia got involved with all that chaos, it's just an invitation for somebody to make a mistake, because now you've got competing politicians, and those competing politicians are going to be competing for control of the Russian national nuclear stockpile, because that's really, I don't know what you call it, the national family jewels. I mean, that's the absolute top of the power pyramid in Russia. So that would be one of the first things they would go after, first political control and then control of the nuclear stockpile to solidify their position. And ungodly mayhem could ensue in the process, and Ukraine could be blamed for it, United States could be blamed for it, NATO could be blamed for it, and the Russian people could react negatively, and we could be, off to the races. All right, here we go again. So, like I alluded to earlier, Ukraine has started more attacks inside of Russia. They were shelling Sherbakino, and at least 2 people were hurt during the shelling. Now, they don't have anybody that close on the border to do that shelling, so those had to be missiles. Here's a bit of diplomatic presence, if you will. France, under their eminent leader, President Emmanuel Macron, has proposed a peace summit, which is good. The problem is he's not willing to invite the Russians. So, like my little brother used to say, what the hell? That's, that would just be them spinning their diplomatic wheels, because there could be no peace if you didn't bring one of the major antagonists, the group that jumped the Ukrainian border and attacked its smaller neighbor. Now, wouldn't you want them to be at that summit? Kind of curious there. Now, over there. Well, Ellie, what's the name of our New World Order guy over there in Europe?
Klaus Schwab.
Klaus. Yeah, the School of Klaus Schwab. So I think this is just some of Klaus telling Emmanuel Macron that he needs to do something diplomatic to take, some media pressure off from whatever, who knows, off from the Green New Deal insanity. Anyway, now we've had reports also, as long as we're on the Green New Deal, that Mrs. Clinton, I don't think I'll even use her name, and their financial organizations have been giving an awful lot of money to people that have been trying to push the Green New Deal in Europe, which is, surprise. What do you think about that, Ellie?
I think, if you're talking about the Clintons, I think they are now if Hillary or Bill would have been something of importance to this election, I think she would be more upfront. But now I heard years ago that pretty much they want to cover up the Clintons and do away with them, so that because lock her up thing, and they at this point Hillary is a has been, is what I'm hearing here in Arkansas. She's a has been, and they don't want to deal with her or her crimes that have been committed. And I think this is the same thing is going to happen with the Biden family. They've got so much crime that if they can put him off to the side after the election, I think they're going to do so.
So I heard today that they have a whistleblower that's so afraid to come out into the public because on the Hunter Biden and Biden, what do we call that? Alleged financial crimes, that they feel he'll be killed if he even comes out. It's such damning evidence. And so they're keeping this guy under wraps for now. So, yeah. And we know that a lot of money came out of Ukraine. And even Biden had admitted that unless one of the prosecutors in Ukraine was nixed, that they weren't going to get aid from the Obama administration back in I guess it was around 2013, 2014. Okay, moving on. The head of our fine State Department, Anthony Blinken, has been poo-pooing the suggestion that there's a need for peace negotiations to even begin in the Ukraine war, because, he believes Russia is going to fall. And moving on. So, why are American and NATO munitions showing up in Mexico? I mean, we know they're there now, but why are they showing up? Now,
could it be William? The thing is we have had the cartel working with um, the gangs and MS-13 placing themselves with ISIS all over the United States. And they are showing up, from what I found out, with these training camps. Now, would they be going to start a war with the United States? I don't think they have enough ammunition. I don't think there's enough of them.
So the Armenian gangs came into United Kingdom, and they caused all kinds of chaos when they first started coming in. And they weren't able to come in until Armenia was allowed into the EU. All right. But once that happened, the Armenians came in a big way. Well, now they're down in Mexico, and Armenians are they're terrible. They run terrible top-down gangs, cartels, mafias in human trafficking and slave trade. Okay, let's just call it slave trade. And I don't like this human trafficking thing. It's slave trade. These people don't have a choice, right? So they are sex slaves as opposed to agricultural slaves. So they're big in that. And in the United Kingdom, what they were doing is they were grabbing up girls off the streets and turning them into prostitutes, right in front of their parents, basically. And now they're down in Mexico, and they're notorious for trafficking any and everything. So, like, if you're on YouTube, you get all these pop-ups for all these get well quick cures that they have some sort of a hack for your better health, and you just have to do it once in the evening. Or they've had the spy scope that just been deregulated by the government because the patent's worn out, or they have the what was the other thing I heard about? I forget. Anyway, moving on. So these and they use voices of people from the UK. These readers, they're just digital readers, and they can with AI clone any voice. And so for a while they were using one of the Fox News anchors' voices, and now they're using a psychologist from Canada's voice. And it's always send us $60. We'll send you a bottle of pills, and you won't have any more arthritis, or you won't have any more diabetes, or you won't have any more toe fungus, or you won't have. It's endless. They'll fix your sight. They'll make your car run better. The earth will be flat. Whatever. Well,
you know what I say about flat Earth?
Involved the cartels.
William, just for a second here, we got these flat earthers, and my thing with them is, go to the edge and show us pictures. Okay, go ahead.
That's kind of the point of no return, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to sail there. You just want to walk there because you don't want to slip off.
Yeah, well, they won't go. They just keep showing the ice down in Antarctica. They keep showing the big ice wall. Well, beyond that is Antarctica, the rest of the continent. Now, I know I'm probably going to get some really bad emails on this one, but if you go beyond that, it's all of Antarctica, and they will not go. They say, well, we don't have pictures of it. Well, I'm saying go to the edge and prove it. You know, I'm one to prove it and data and, documents. And that's, what this show's all about is to prove or have the data to back it up. And they have been
So
unable to show me the backup on it.
flat Earth is the equivalent of the Green New Deal.
Yep. Hmm.
They're both untenable. They
Oh
both
my goodness.
defy all the laws of physics, torsional physics, plasma physics, optical physics. Nothing works the way they say it works on the flat Earth front or on the. If the flat Earth thing worked, we couldn't have the automobile. We couldn't have internal combustion engines. We couldn't have rotational dynamics. So anyway, okay, moving on. So we have the Armenians gangs and mafia getting involved in Mexico. And it's a good chance they're the ones that are trafficking, or at least partially trafficking, these weapons, because Armenia is on the coast off from Greece and Italy, and overland, if you just go north and east, you're in the Russian-Ukraine war front right there. So all they have to do is traffic across Moldova, Romania, and into Armenia. So that's likely where these arms are coming from. The chance of them getting them out of the strait there at the bottom of the Black Sea, there by Turkey, is incredibly slim, because our Navy will be looking at everything going through that area. I'm sure we board ships and search, and we do all kinds of stuff in that area. So I don't think it's Russia selling them, but it is definitely black market sales. Now, in any proxy war, so like when we were in Vietnam, when we went into Libya, when we were involved with Syria, our arms, a third of whatever we use ends up in the hands of the bad guys. Now, no matter what side you're on, remember there's always two factions. There's a faction that's for what you're doing, and there's a faction that's not for what you're doing. And so we take, and the same thing happens in the proxy nations. There's a faction of for the munitions, and there's a faction that's against the munitions. Well, the against people will take part of those weapons and make a profit from them and slow a war down or arm its friends or whatever. And so you always have to deal with that second faction within a government that doesn't want to go along with that proxy war. And so you're always going to have weapons being bled off that way. And the second reason, or the third reason is, when you have a proxy war, you don't have direct control of the weaponry. You hand it off to a second nation, and what the second nation does with it is largely up to them. Now, we might have advisors or something like that in there helping them out, but those advisors don't have direct control of the weapons. They might have some effect on the leadership within that country, but they don't have direct control of those weapons. So proxy wars are notoriously ugly for having not only weapons caught up and siphoned off into the black market, into like arms sales, but also people disappear. Large numbers of people disappear, and they're trafficked. So, yeah, we could call it war slavery, and even weapons slavery. It's gruesome. Anytime a military contest begins, it will devolve into the absolute worst things that you can imagine in humanity. There's no way out from that because it's a absolute contest of wills. It's not like a legal contest. It's not like a popularity contest. This is a contest where either you beat the guy that's coming at you brains out, or they beat your brains out. Or if you're lucky and you're caught without a weapon, they don't just somewhat summarily shoot you and take you hostage, take you prisoner. So there's no end to ways that weapons leak out. Now, let's say you've got guys at one end of a trench and they have half their weapons at the other end of the trench, and they get sucked into an engagement in the first end of the trench, and they lose the battle. Well, everything on the far end of the trench is now war spoils. Now, you can use it on the other side. The other side can use it just like when Ukraine gets Russian tanks on the battlefield, or you can use it to make profit, or you can use it to make deals with other countries, or you can use it to trade technology. There's a myriad of different ways you can use those captured weapons. Now, speaking of our friend Lindsey Graham, Ellie and I were talking about him earlier, that he seems to be, I guess, hell-bent for this Ukrainian war to continue. Wouldn't that be a good way of saying it, Ellie?
Yeah.
He's like almost mindlessly in love with it.
Yeah.
You know, there's in war there's this thing called bloodlust, and people say it doesn't happen. And I've talked to guys from Vietnam, and I'll tell you right now, bloodlust happens. Well, it seems like there's a couple senators and some politicians out there that have the equivalent, I guess, of combat bloodlust. We'll just call it warlust. They cannot live without it. It's like the air they breathe. And we've seen that with Graham. We've watched some of it with Romney. We've seen some of it with other leaders. And having been in the military, and I know Graham is a general in the military. Okay, he was an attorney. All right, it's different shuffling papers than packing weapons. Now, I was in maintenance. I can't say a lot about myself, much more than that. But I can say that being in maintenance in no way is as being involved in war as being in direct combat. You know, we create and and maintain the most precious weapons in the military inventory. And we put officers in the cockpits, and we fuel them, we load them, we cock them, we get them completely ready, and then we ship those pilots out with these airplanes that fly at the speed of light. And, you know, just beg God that we haven't made a mistake and not bring those guys back. When you're involved in aircraft maintenance, the one thing you want to do is never, you know, kill a pilot. That's like the most cardinal sin of all sins. So if you're reckless, I guess you can deal with that sort of thing with your soul. I personally couldn't, so I made damn sure that everything I did was towards keeping my pilots safe, because I didn't want a situation where I needed to go out and pick up a pilot with baggies. It's a disgusting thing. So I made sure that none of my pilots got hurt. I did everything in my power. But I don't think these guys like Senator Graham feel that way about our military. They don't have that conscious fear that if they use the wrong word or make the wrong gesture, they're going to cost lives.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it occurs to them. Or if it does occur to them, they have to be, evil, really evil. So, okay, moving on.
Well,
So
now, William, me and you
Go ahead.
talked about Senator Graham, and I'm concerned because he was a big part of Ukraine and trying to get not Zelensky, but the president before, to attack Putin in 2013. Now, I believe there was, I might have to check. I can't say it was the same president that, because there was one that took all of Ukraine's money and fled, and he's now oligarch. And then there was another one. But Senator Graham has been pushing war since 2013 in Ukraine. Now, you told me he's like a warmonger.
Yeah, well, I have an opinion. This is my opinion. There's people that will send other people to die for reasons other than protecting a populace. And not wanting to get personally involved.
Yeah.
Now, how many senators' children are in the military?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Now, there's a lot of senators that have been in the military, and I respect those folks.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Luna, I guess is her name. She was a senior airman. That's the equivalent of a E4 sergeant.
Who?
In the Air Force. Senator Luna.
Luna walked out of the meetings today when she was getting data from Comer. She walked out today of the hearings. She was upset. She could not believe that they're not going anywhere with the hearings, and she walked out. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, she's prior service. She was in the Air Force, and she didn't raise to the level of a non-commissioned officer, but she wasn't like an officer. She was just like a worker,
Yeah.
The people that get everything done.
I think that really makes a statement on what's going on with Biden, Zelensky, Ukraine, and finding out what he was doing. Biden, that is, as vice president in the Ukraine. And I'm going to have to look. I want to watch the hearings to see what was said before, and then what was said after, because I don't want to just go on a news report that she got up and left due to the bribery issue. I think there's a lot more to it. I think that looking at our military being there and finding out what Biden had done, I think there's more to her just getting up and leaving. I think it
Well,
has to do with the military.
Look at Representative McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, handing a debt bill that allows, for us to get into more debt, and basically codifying the Green New Deal. The
Yeah.
Republicans handed the Democrats a bill that allows for the Green New Deal, and under their control, knowing directly what it would be used for, what it would be manipulated for, and went ahead and did it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
What does that tell us about what war will do and what they're willing to do, in the name of their climate delusion? So these are all this is tied together. None of this is happening in a vacuum. It's all tied together. And these folks can't decouple their positions. And I think that's what's frustrating her.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to see if I can find it. Now, I know you mentioned earlier about the jets and over DC. I think there's a lot more to
Now,
this,
I'll
and
get
we
to
just
that.
hadn't
I'll
found
get
it
to that
yet.
in a minute. I've got a few more things, Ellie.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So, in Ukraine, well, I just wanted to go to this because everybody's been hearing about it. So, remember that gal, Miss Griner, who's released from Russian arrest, and Biden did a swap. The Biden administration did a swap with a prisoner we had here in the United States. Well, he was known as the Merchant of Death. So he was the biggest arms dealer in the world when we arrested him. And they turned him back over to Russia. So you can imagine the contacts that guy has had since Miss Griner got back to play basketball, after bad-mouthing the United States, and all we did to help her. Anyway, moving on. That's just a prickly subject for me. Now, the largest dam on the Dnipro River in Kherson was blown up, I guess overnight, okay? And it's the only way to get from the Ukrainian side of the war front across the river to the Crimea. That's what the river border is. Well, that dam's been blown, and it's flooding all the way down into Kherson, and it's doing all kinds of environmental damage. But I think what happened there is that Russia likely blew that dam, and kind of here's why I believe it, because remember, Putin's most important thing is to maintain those Navy bases in Crimea, at Sevastopol and such. And that's where they used to have their nuclear subpins. I don't know if you guys knew that as well. Did you know that, Ellie?
Uh-uh.
Near Sevastopol, that they had their nuclear subpins. Yeah. They repaired all their subs for the Atlantic, and for the I'm sorry, and for the Mediterranean subfleet. Yeah, so they don't want to give up the Crimea. That's the last thing they're going to be willing to give up. So I think that's one of the reasons Russia blew that down, is because now there's not a thoroughfare to bring heavy arms across that river into Crimea. They'll have to either go by boat or go by ship, pontoon bridge, something. And with that river flowing quickly, there's no way to start an offensive across that river. It literally stops everything in its tracks. So I think that's the reason Russia did it. The other reason is now that power station and dam, well, the power station was damaged as well, not just the dam. And that couldn't have just been blown with a missile. That couldn't have just been, damaged with shelling. That would have took heavy charges, thousands of pounds of C4, cutting shape charges to blow that dam, because those are major structures, and they're not built to withstand 100% of the water pressure. Dams are designed to deal with 300% of the water pressure. So they're massive works, and so it takes heavy charges to open those up.
Mm-hmm.
At least open it up to a point where it would tear the dam apart.
Yeah.
So now Russia doesn't have to defend Crimea in such a big way now. So they're not as concerned about getting all their arms across the half-blown bridge and railroad bridge that goes from Russia proper into Crimea. The only problem they have now is water for the population, because as that water goes down, the intake for the water in Crimea, their major water source, is cut. As soon as it goes down, I guess it's 20 feet or 30 feet, something like that, then it's over for Crimea having water from the Dnipro River. But that would be worth it in the short term to Putin to be able to just put his forces up in the other three provinces where there's land war going on, and be able to concentrate his forces to stop any Ukrainian offensive. And now the Ukrainians say they've got an offensive going on, but there's looking at my paper here. They've got the offensive going on, but it doesn't look like it's gathering much steam.
Yeah.
Okay. Next in my military news is, we had F-16s were scrambled out of Andrews Air Force Base and out of an Air Force base in New Jersey. And people were startled
Sonic booms.
Virginia and in Maryland when there was a sonic boom. Now,
William, my whole question is, why were they flying that low?
They weren't flying that low.
I now realize I was at Beale Air Force Base, the home of the SR-71 and the U-2. Now, when they would fly low, it would be a sonic boom. When they flew high, it wouldn't do that.
You have a sonic boom from any altitude. When you fly low at a sonic boom, it blow out the windows.
Right.
But these weren't booms that blew out windows. These are just booms that startled people. Those are high altitude.
But what I'm saying is, they could fly low and it would do the sonic booms if they flew high. We didn't really hear the sonic booms at Beale. And when I asked, when I was able to talk to the pilots and I asked them about that, they said it's a choice of the pilot. So did the choice of the pilot with the F-16 was to let everybody know? See, this is kind of, to me, that's why I think I'm starting to think it was this I don't know. I'm still looking.
I'll explain it to you and answer the question.
Okay.
Okay. So what happened was is they were scrambled to intercept a Cessna Citation. Now, the Cessna Citation is a small business jet, and the Citation is about 30 years old. Well, it flew from Tennessee up to the Hamptons, and during its flight from Tennessee to Hamptons, it did the proper flight following with air traffic control from there to the Hamptons. Well, at the Hamptons, the jet turned around like it was about to descend to go into an airport, okay? A lot of times you cross the base. So if you have air traffic or a tower at an airport, and you have runway, you go perpendicular to the runway across the tower, all right? And then you either turn right or left base. You go out either 5 or 10 miles, turn 180, and then come back in to do your landing, all right? Well, he crossed the base and he made the turn, but he just did a 180 and headed back to where he came from. But it didn't go towards Tennessee this time. This time it went towards the no-fly zone over D.C. and Virginia and Maryland. Now, you have to have special authorization to enter those traffic patterns over D.C. It's a no-fly zone that the military maintains to protect the president and Congress. Okay, so this jet's not responding anymore, this business citation, and continued in D.C. Well, so air traffic control contacted NORAD. NORAD scrambled the jets, and the jets came out of Andrews, and because we have at every military base, we have military fighters on rapid standby, meaning we have pilots sleep within running distance from their airplane. And they're able to scramble in just minutes. So as this Citation, which is a fast airplane, okay, it's a twin jet engine aircraft, was headed towards DC. The jets that scrambled out of New Jersey weren't going to get there in time to intercept them, and so they asked for authorization to go faster than the sound barrier, because they have a Mach limitation on all of our Air Force jets over the United States. So we don't startle the public, we don't break windows. You can tear up buildings by reaching the Mach speed. And they were given authorization, so that's who you heard. Those two sonic booms were from the two F-16s that were scrambled out of New Jersey, as opposed to the two F-16s that were scrambled out of Andrews. Right. Andrews were able to do a vector and intercept them. Right. And so that's why.
Now, I heard the guy was, when they looked at it, he was slumped over in his plane.
Okay, so what happened in the plane is this pilot was a millionaire. He had his daughter and his daughter's nanny, and I think it was his sister or something like that, in the jet with him. And if you go through rapid decompression in a jet, when the mask falls down, you put it on your face first so you don't lose consciousness. You get direct oxygen. Well, if that happens in a jet, it's easy to know you've been depressurized. You have a couple seconds to react to it, and it's startling, so you react to it quickly. But if you have a slow decompression everybody just slowly drifts off to sleep. And the airplane, being on autopilot, just continues to fly. And then it'll fly until it runs out of fuel. And so what likely happened was there was a slow leak, or the oxygen system in the airplane failed. So it's a pressurized airplane, the Citation, and it gives a certain amount of oxygen and pressure in the cockpit. And that pressure comes from what's called bleed air. So in each jet engine, there's a bunch of discs of impellers. And at different stages on those impellers, you can get what's called bleed air. And it's really highly pressurized air. And then it comes out into the cabin. And as it expands, it acts like air conditioning. And it also gives you oxygen to breathe. And you can also get supplemental oxygen from, there's called liquid oxygen bottles on most airplanes. That's called LOX. So either LOX failed or compression failed, or they both failed together. And likely everybody just went to sleep and died on that airplane. Now, when the F-16s caught up to the airplane, they flew right in front of the airplane, which gives it an incredible, if you've ever flown an aircraft right behind another jet, the wake turbulence is terrible. It would have just shook the crap out of that little jet. Okay, so they did wake turbulence and they dropped flares. So F-16s have buckets of flares on the back, and then they kick off flares, and so it's hard to miss that. And as the one F-16 did that, another F-16 flying right next to the Citation couldn't see anybody in the cockpit. There was no activity at all. So that means everybody's laid down, they've fallen over, they're no longer visible. So that's what had happened. And the airplane flew until it ran out of gas. And as it runs out of fuel, it slows down, and it slows down, and it slows down. And finally, one of the wings will go slow enough that it will no longer have lift. And when a wing loses lift, there's a sudden drop in the wing. So whatever wing's going the slowest, okay, at this point, it's going to drop. And as soon as that wing drops, the plane starts to spiral. And they just spiral down until they hit the ground. And that's what happened with this Citation. And the people likely didn't feel it. They went down in a forest area, so, no buildings or anything like that was damaged. There was no fire, which means they ran out of fuel. There's no fuel to burn. The jet had sucked its tanks dry. And so, yeah, the people didn't feel anything when it hit the ground because they had been dead for a while.
Ah.
Okay. So let's see. Yep. I think I've got everything. Did I miss anything, do you think?
I don't think so.
Okay, so now the sonic boom I'm talking about, for a jet to get from point A to point B fast, the higher the altitude is, the faster you can fly. So at 48,000 feet, the air density is like a fourth of what it is here on the ground. And so you can really hustle. And to break the sound barrier, you have to go fast. And so the higher the altitude, the faster your airspeed. And so that's why they were at high altitude when they broke the sound barrier, because they were trying to catch up. And if they're trying to catch up, they're not going to do it on the ground. They're going to do it at high altitude.
Yeah.
Because a jet doesn't have to worry about descending. If they descend quickly on a propeller engine, you get what's called hull shock, and it'll crack the cylinders on your motor, and so you want to descend slowly. But on a jet, you can basically drive it straight down, so you can lose altitude really quickly. So they'll get up altitude hustle, and then they'll drop rapidly down onto their vector.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I say they were at a high altitude. Okay. And an F-16 is not what's called super cruise. So a super cruise means that just at military power, without afterburners, you can break the sound barrier. The same thing is true with the SR-71. It was super cruise. You don't have to have an afterburner to break the sound barrier, but an F-16 you do, because there's more drag than there is thrust. And so what happens is they have to go into afterburner. So you add 2 F-16s likely in full afterburner. So there's 5 stages of afterburner at high altitude, breaking the sound barrier. And not just one jet, but 2 jets. And that's why the people were able to hear it. Okay. So we talked about air traffic control not being able to talk. So what happened was air traffic control was no longer able to contact the pilots. So it was at a decent altitude, but on the Cessna, but they could track it on radar, but they couldn't get anybody to respond over the radio. So when you're flying a jet, you go from one waypoint to the next. And going from Tennessee to upstate New York, they would probably gone through, I would guess, 5 to 8 waypoints. So there's radio beacons at different airports along the way. And you fly at different altitudes to go to those radio beacons. And that's one way that the pilots know where they're going. And those are called waypoints. And so you go from one beacon to the next. And as you go from one, get to that beacon, then you change course to the next beacon. There's never ever usually one shot to your destination when you're under air traffic control. They take you from beacon to beacon because that's their highway in the sky. And then they separate you by time and altitude beacons. If you're below about 12,000 feet, then you're no longer in what's called IFR instrument flight rules. You're in visual flight rules. If you're in visual flight rules, you don't have to talk to air traffic control. You have to talk to the tower before you can land. You have to talk to the airport and announce that you're going to land if there isn't a tower at the airport, because some airports aren't controlled. There could be a grass strip or whatever, but you still have to announce you're going to land. But once you're above 12,000 feet, generally you have to be under air traffic control, and that's what this jet was. So, and I believe it had been flying at about 30,000 feet. So it wasn't at a low altitude until it started its downward spiral running out of fuel. Then it would run out of airspeed. Then the wing would drop. Then it would spiral and finally crash. Okay, that's what I have, Ellie. Is there something else you wanted to bring up?
No, I think we covered it all, and great show. And, we'll be back, me and you, tomorrow night with the World War III report. And I think it's going to be real good. I know I've been taking notes with you and then getting a little bit. Now, I did post the thing with Luna for everybody to read on this, that she left the hearing today. So I think it's going to be a great show tomorrow, unless I wore you out today.
I'm not worn out.
Well, and to let everybody know,
it's hard to decide on Tuesdays. It's hard to decide what to talk about because there's a flood of information. It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Oh yeah, I always had that problem with Tuesday, because I always had a lot on Tuesday when I did my show, when I do the news, because there's so much of it. Now, let everybody know I had a scope done today. They put a scope down my throat, and so I'm very hoarse. And after talking for a little bit, I start losing my voice. So I'll be back tomorrow with William and give my throat. They gave me some stuff for it, and So it's nothing's
Even
wrong.
talk about like we didn't even talk about like the economy, how that affects war. We didn't talk
Yeah,
about
we could do
Taiwan at
that
all.
tomorrow. We
We
could do
didn't talk about
Taiwan and
the
what's
crazy stuff in Congress.
uh-huh. So
We haven't talked about Spain's failed premier now because he's a student of Schwab. They want to put him in as Secretary General of NATO. We haven't talked about that. There's a myriad of things we haven't brought to the fore. We haven't talked about what's going on over in Portugal. We haven't talked about some of the ramifications we've had in shipping out of Bulgaria. We didn't even get into Israel. We didn't even get into the nuclear threat beyond Russia. So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. So, for a war report, and you know, everything affects war. Energy affects war. Money affects war. Population, politics affects war. Nothing. That's why when you go to war, politicians think they can control what goes on in war, but war ends up controlling them because it affects everything in the nation. It's an absolute vacuum. There's just no escape from it until there's finally a peaceful end to a conflict. It affects everybody involved there, and there's no relief from it. So, yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ellie, for the opportunity. I really enjoyed being here.
Subscribe and hit that like.
Trying to speak a little more slowly and bring some of my opinions to the fore. And yeah, but I think Ukraine's in real trouble. I don't think Ukraine can continue to prosecute a fight. And if the actual desire is to regain those provinces, they can't do it without NATO air power directly. I mean, full NATO air power, all parts of air power, plus a ground component. And I don't think NATO's really thought this through.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I don't think the people who are in charge over at the National Security Council and Blinken and
UN.
the folks over at the Fed and a number of senators at what's the name of it? Anyway, one of the big conferences in Congress over military issues and spending really have a comprehension of what this is going to do. So anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in, and looks like Miss Miki, my service dog, has finally given up on me. She hates the telephone. It takes my attention away from her.
She might hide your phone on you.
Yeah, she just doesn't like the phone because it distracts from, you know, Miss Miki, and Miss Miki's world's all about, you know, Daddy and Miss Miki. It's always, you got to have your boy. So I have her boy. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Be sure to share with your friends, and be sure to like if you enjoyed what we discussed. And we'll be back tomorrow at same, I guess, bat time, same bat station. Right. Bye, Ellie.
All right. So glad you were here today and covered for me while I had some stuff done. And subscribe, and we'll see everyone tomorrow for the World War III report.